First of all, I'm Jeremy Majeski. I'm the principal of Frankfurt International School's Wiesbaden campus, a campus who 3 years ago has made a commitment to be intentionally small, recognizing the impact that small schools can have on community, on learning, and just really excited about a lot of the work that we're doing. And this group has come together, the ECIS Intentionally Small Schools Group, to do a lot of collaboration about what it means to be a small school, share some of the struggles, share some of the passions, excitement, and we're really excited for our session today. We've got a special guest speaker, Kevin Bartlett, who's joining us today. I was just telling Kevin before everyone logged on, there's not a day or a conversation that goes by that I don't think goes back to Kevin in some way or another. Kevin is, for those of you who don't know, is one of the initial founders of the PYP, heavily connected to quite a few accreditation bodies such as NEASC, CIS. He has been in international education for over 50 years, although I don't understand, he only looks about 50 years old, so I don't know how that all came to be. But we're really excited to have his wealth of experience join us today. Kevin is also one of the founders of the Common Ground Collaborative and is doing a lot of work around curriculum and some of the purpose of schools in international schools all over the world. And so we're excited to have him join us today. We know that small schools, there's some sort of magic that we have in small schools. And when we're talking about our learning purpose, which is what Kevin will be helping us think about today, it can easily come to life in a small school with some small tweaks along the way. So Kevin, I'm going to turn things over to you and take us away.
Thanks, Jeremy. And thanks everybody for being here. Thanks, ECIS, for the chance to chat with people who work in small schools and do it on purpose. I was just saying, I'm in Ecuador right now. I'm in the hotel room in Quito. I just spent 2 amazing days with a small school that is now 30 geodesic domes and 2 safari tents in a forest in Ecuador. It's called Mine. And I was just joking with Jeremy and Sarah and saying that I stopped calling it a workshop because I wasn't working. I called it a play shop. So I think from now on, if I do another 50 years, I want it to be packed with play shops. So good to be here. If you work in education for as long as I have, you cough a lot, excuse me. You think a lot about why we do it. What are we here for? Why do I keep doing this? I'm a bird photographer. I spent yesterday at 4,000 meters photographing Andean condor coming off their roosting cliffs. I had to be up at 4 a.m. to get there. So as a birder, I know my purpose. I'm looking for natural magic. But then I come back to work in a sense. So why do we do that? What are we really here for? That's what I'd like to talk about. And I've set my timer because I'm notoriously long-winded. So one way to think about this is if I said to you, I haven't met you before, I actually have met many of you before, but what do you do for a living? And I said, please do this in a different way. In one line, what's your job description? But you can't use your job title. What do we actually do for a living? What's our real purpose? Why do we get up in the morning? In one sentence, but you can't use your job title. So I have a number of these examples. If you have one, and it's been recorded, so I'll look at them later because I have to keep in the flow. I'd love to hear your one-line job description. What do you actually do for a living? No, really. It's this is a kind of no really session. So I guess mine is, I try to bring clarity to complexity. Schools are enormously complex. Handy and Aitken, Understanding Organization, said that the 2 most complex organizations on the planet are schools and hospitals. I just had that great conversation with the community at Mine, teachers, parents, students, staff. Schools and hospitals, what they have in common. One of the things that came out was we save lives. We save lives. We're in a high stakes business, low pay, high stakes. And they're complex. Schools are complicated, and you can drown in that complexity. A friend of mine said recently, in terms of lack of progress sometimes in his own school, he said, you know, Kevin, it's hard to work on school, in school. When we're in school, it's hard to work on school. So I have the privilege of having worked in schools for many years, and now I get to work on school with great leaders, great teachers, great kids, great parents, trying to take that complexity and bring some clarity. So I also think of myself as a capacity builder, and I think this is especially relevant when I think about intentionally small schools. I try to build capacity in 3 areas. Culture could be defined as the way we do things around here, or what I like even more, what we do when nobody's watching. Curriculum, creating great continuous learning flows from early childhood to high school. And then community, using Margaret Wheatley's wonderful phrase, how are we when we're together? So my 2 days with mine in Quito were a community building exercise, developing a set of community principles that we would all live by. And when I think of intentionally small schools, here's my hunch. I led a very small school in Namibia, a startup, Wintug International School, to which I'm very closely connected even now. And it seems to me that if it takes a lot of human contact to build culture and community, intentionally small schools kind of have a head start. You're way ahead of the game because by being small, there's just more chance to know people. And relationships are at the heart of everything. But on the curriculum side, I think it can be tougher because you don't have a whole stack of faculty with years and years of curriculum design experience. And sometimes budgets, I imagine, can be tight. So it's quite hard to hire, the full-time curriculum coordinator type roles. So that's just a first thought about this Venn diagram. In my own work, as I've gone about trying to build capacity in the areas of these 3 C's, culture, curriculum, community, I realized this. This is from John Hattie. He said, I used to think that the quality of learning in a classroom was about what teachers know and can do. Now I think it's about what teachers think. And I think it's really important to know what we think our job is. And I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes or so talking about a school learning design that seems to me now to be very elegant in its simplicity, but took me 40 years to develop. It's that hard thing of working for simplicity and realizing that finding the simple takes a very, very long time. So I'd like to share that simplicity with you because given the complexity of a leader's job or a teacher's job, we can be afflicted by this ailment, the paralysis of enormity. But everything's so connected. If I change this, I'll have to change that. And then the parents won't like this. Oh, and then we'd have to change our reporting system. You know the story that runs in our heads at 2 a.m. So how do we get through the paralysis of enormity? I think one thing that paralyzes is we think we need all the answers. I don't think we need all the answers. I think we need the questions. I think it's more powerful to take questions to a community and then lead the community towards shared answers than it is to feel we know all the answers because we can't. So leadership, teaching as inquiry. We think of inquiry as a learning process for kids, and it is deeply, but it's also a lifelong process. And I think of leadership as fearless inquiry, like the question for today. So what's our learning purpose? No, really, not the rhetoric. One of the things we suffer from is this awful kind of barrier that we call transfer. The difference between the rhetoric and the reality, the workshop and the classroom, the ideas that sound good but never get translated into classroom practice. So I'm always trying to cut through that sort of invisible wall between rhetoric and reality. These are the questions that we brought to the table, that we being the Common Ground Collaborative, which is a network of thinkers, really. It's not a big bureaucracy. It's a very tiny team, work in 20 countries, but still very small. So we began with what is learning? How can we make learning happen if we haven't decided what it is? And then the kind of content question, what's worth learning? And then the diversity question, as a verb, diversify. How does everyone access learning? And then how do we teach for that and build learning cultures? And then how do we provide evidence of learning? And right now I have the great privilege of collaborating with Jane McTighe on something called the Balanced Assessment System, which is really a revolutionary new framework to complement traditional testing with a whole range of ways that kids can demonstrate their own learning. It's driven by 5 principles itself. This isn't that workshop, but if you're interested, that's going on too. So here's an insight. It's hard to make learning happen if we haven't decided what it is. And that, to me, has been one of the great epiphanies of my many, many years of thinking about education. We built it into the ACE protocol for New England in terms of a learning principle. schools should have a definition of learning. But honestly, I've seen it not fully understood. What I really meant in writing that was to understand the learning process, not to write words about how much we love learning and how valuable it is and we do it for life, etc. But how does it actually happen? We decided to look at what experts do, and we looked at the fact that experts are experts in the ideas of their field. So we needed to build conceptual learning. Experts are highly skilled, so we needed to build competency. And we surely need more than ever now expert human beings. So we had to build in character. And we built a three-part definition of learning as conceptual, competency, and character, each with its own pedagogy. I won't go through them now because this is recorded and you can get the slides as well. But we basically said, we can't just have a definition of learning unless it drives a pedagogy. And that pedagogy must be simple enough to work in any cultural context around the world. So as one example, when we build ideas, we connect to prior knowledge. We work with the kids using various processes of inquiry, historical inquiry, scientific inquiry, to construct deeper, newer understandings, a better theory. And then we share it, we contribute it, until we can say we understand that. A similar process for competency, but a different process and a different sentence starter we are able to. And again, character built in until as a person, I become more. So one of the things that we built into this model that I think works for schools, including more easily, I think, in small schools, is a definition of the learning process. There's the definition on the screen. It's the process of the consolidation and extension of conceptual understanding, competency, and character. The reason I'm talking about it now is that it provides a shared language for all members of the culture, because cultures share a language. And as Drucker famously said, culture is strategy for breakfast. So for building in our small school a culture, we have found, honestly, in any language, it works beautifully in other languages too. Kids saying, I now understand that, I'm able to, I'm becoming more. Parents understanding that we teach for conceptual understanding, competency, and character, that we're building learning experts, brings a huge amount of clarity to a group of human beings. And I like this thought from W. Edwards Deming, the guy responsible for transforming Japanese industry after the Second World War. He created total quality management. I like the in-your-face nature of this statement. If you can't describe what you're doing as a process, then you don't know what you're doing. And honestly, I see a lot of organizations, I won't say they don't know what they're doing, but I'd be very interested to hear them describe their work as a process. And that learning process drives pedagogical processes, teaching and assessing, so that you have a common language among teachers. When teachers get together to plan, well, as the visual arts specialist, I really need the kids to understand that, be able to become more. Well, wearing my scientific hat, I need them to, et cetera, et cetera. So one part of this work today that I'm sharing is building experts in a small community where everybody shares a language. Kids with deep conceptual understanding of ideas that matter, high levels of competency in key skills, and strong positive moral character. So that's a process, but we also need a learning product, don't we? If I say, what's our learning purpose? No, really, especially with Jay, we talk a lot about the process and the product. So here's another thought. If it's hard to make learning happen if you haven't defined it, it's hard to have a shared direction if you don't have a shared destination. So the other big idea I wanted to share today, out of many I could, but I'm watching my own clock. If we've decided how we learn, still leaves us with a content question. David Perkins' wonderful, simple question: what's worth learning? We said it's worth learning what makes us human. The community mission statement that I worked with the Mind School in Ecuador on Saturday ended up being becoming human. I love that as a mission statement, becoming human. As humans, we all seek purpose and balance. We look for patterns and principles that help us explain the world. We need to contribute to sustainability. We're group members. Group membership has a very powerful political force. Look at politics now, never more divided. Because we're divided into groups now, we could talk for a long time about the social media impact on group membership as well, but that's a more negative conversation. We're storytellers, we're creators. So we're creating learning experts in this learning model in a framework of content which includes the disciplines, but sitting above the disciplines, more transcendental, more transformative, more transdisciplinary ideas of human commonality. This is from my Honduran roots. My wife is Honduras. That enables you to look at content in any context. It can be national or international because these are universal ideas. You can work within a discipline or across disciplines or beyond disciplines. And again, so what? If the learning definition gives rise to a simple shared pedagogy, what do we do with this idea of content organized under human commonalities? Julie Stern's work, J. McTighe Grant Wiggins' work, everybody in constructivism would probably agree the big goal is what the kids take away. It's the purpose. So the core of what I wanted to talk about and why I chose this title is the whole point for me of the education is what the kids take away, what my friend Bill Gerrits used to call the transportable gifts. That wonderful book about the Vietnam War, the things they carried. What are our kids going to do with the stuff we teach them? So what are our transfer goals? I already talked about the difficulty we have in transferring rhetoric into reality, the workshop into the classroom. What we realized was, and this was in conversations with Jay, that if we're going to describe what our learners look like, and if it's by nature going to be transdisciplinary, because life is not organized into disciplines, then our 6 human commonalities could give rise to what we call the portrait of a learner. So, for example, a learner who comes to us at the age of 2 and spends 14, 15 years with us, thinking about well-being, finding their own purpose, being helped to find spiritual understanding, etc., is likely to become a balanced person. A person who's always looking at the patterns of why things happen, at causation, change, principles of the way the world is ordered, will become a rational problem solver. I don't have time to unpack all of these, but I think you'll get the idea. Organized content with a conceptual framework, producing kids with an amazing capacity for conceptual transfer because they have deep conceptual understanding of ideas that matter. And then we created pathways to that portrait, the curriculum, if you like, what we call a learning matrix. The descriptors of the portrait at the top, embedded in the human commonalities, which themselves frame the content. The content organized into very powerful learning modules around ideas that matter, driven by compelling questions. How does money work? So what's real news? What's our learning purpose? What is anti-racism? Each of those modules organized as simply as possible. Why are we teaching this? What will the kids learn, organized under conceptual learning goals, competency learning goals, character learning goals? The evidence piece. And right now I'm working with Jay using AI to develop very powerful performance assessment tasks for each of those portrait capacities that I just briefly touched on. Then how will we teach it to them? Then how did it go? So very simple. When I'm planning my teaching, why are they learning this? What will they learn? How will I know if they've learned it? How will I teach it to them? How did it go? Coming together like this. Our learning purpose, creating learning experts who are good with ideas, good with skills, and good people, who spent their learning life with us from 2 to 18, embedded in deep content that matters until they emerge as a balanced person, a respectful relationship builder, and the rest is on the screen. How do we know? Because we've built genuine, authentic, performance-based assessments around each of these descriptors. And the kids have gathered evidence in well-managed portfolios that increasingly will get them into college. So even though we didn't arrive at it in this order, I'm suggesting our learning purpose starts with our end in mind. What is our primary purpose? For me, it's now conceptual transfer, well described and assessed to, and this phrase that popped into my head a few weeks ago that I now like. I think our purpose is nurturing young people who can make sense of the world and help the world make more sense. And it seems to me that that frames our culture and our curriculum and our community. Everybody works together to create this portrait. In different schools, it's called different things. Portrait of a winged lion at the Macri School in Tegucigalpa. Portrait of an owl at AIP in Panama. But it's the same idea. Our purpose is to send out kids who can make sense of the world and help the world make more sense. And it just seems to me that if knowing our people is the heart of great learning, a good friend of mine used to say, we only know, it actually was Bill Powell, with whom I co-founded Next Frontier Inclusion. Bill sadly passed away way too soon. Used to say, we only need to be good at three things. We need to know our kids, know how people learn, and know our stuff. And knowing our people seems to me to give intentionally small schools a massive head start. So that's why we came up with the idea, Laura Benson and I think Laura's on the call, that possibly we could help intentionally small schools with the curriculum framework, which would help build culture and community, because you may not have as many resources as a big school. So we came up with this idea of the BLISS project. I do check myself that I'm not interested just because I like the acronym, but I do like the acronym. Building learning for intentionally small schools. So that's the end of my 20 minutes. I think I'm not too bad on time, Jeremy. If I'd had longer to prepare it, I've always liked this. Apologies. If I'd had more time, I'd have written a shorter letter. If I'd had more time, I'd have written a shorter slide deck. So thank you for listening. I realized that was a drink from a fire hose. What we'd like to do now is ask you to think about that for about 15 to 20 minutes in breakout groups. ECIS is organizing it because I'm hopeless at that stuff. So here's the idea. One culture, one curriculum, one community, built backwards from those transfer goals for learners. What will be the things they carry? It's kind of simplicity, synthesis, and system working together. How might that work in a small school? Is it an interesting idea? Is there a point in future conversations about this? So I'm going to hand back to ECIS for the breakout session. Jeremy, what are your thoughts about what you just heard? No more prompts than that. Just share a conversation about if I've provoked anything that's interesting or useful or something that you think is food for thought. So what are those thoughts? Thanks, Jeremy.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kevin. I kind of just want to say amen after all of this. Lots of great stuff here. So thank you for that. I've gone ahead and I've created some breakout rooms, some Renee's breakout rooms. Let's take about 15 minutes just to digest a little bit about what Kevin had said. I really do hope that you stick around because after we pull back from the breakout rooms, I'd love to hear a little bit about what everyone had talked about and kind of what ideas are coming to the forefront. So I'm going to go ahead and open up breakout rooms now, and we'll see you back in about 15 minutes. Here we go. Buddy, we lost a few people in that switch back, but I wanted to take about the next 10 minutes or so and open things up to the larger group. What did Kevin talk about, or what did you talk about in your groups that really resonated with you with the conversation today? I'd love to open up a conversation to a larger group. So go ahead and take the floor. We're a small enough group. Go ahead and unmute yourself and go ahead and share.
I'm going to jump in then. I loved that expression that you talked about becoming human, Kevin, and I think all the work that you do in order to make simple the complex squeezes down into the idea of becoming human. And I wonder whether the potential within small schools for being really able to explore the inclusive nature of learning together, and that there's there's better opportunities to not be quite, this is a double negative, but to not be quite so institutionalized as sometimes happens in larger communities. The scope for being able to individualize the learning. And then I'm not sure why this is, but quite often the innovative nature of intentionally small schools, where we're perhaps more forgiving of the kind of blunders that might happen as we experiment and play together, but because it's intentional, perhaps we attract also a different type of educator to an perhaps feeling of unfinished or not as large and glossy, but that allows us to be really courageously innovative. And I think that quite a lot of that comes from the fact that in a small school we contribute to the crafting of our culture in a way that you can get lost between the cracks perhaps in a larger organization. So there's some meanderings around the idea of becoming human being such a beautiful sort of definition of what intentionally small schools are perhaps setting out to do.
Yeah, it's just for examples, walking into one of the domes over the weekend, and there's while the school was still in session, I was there for one afternoon, and there was a young lady, a female student, I think she has Down syndrome, and she was crying on the shoulder of one of the teachers. They were all sitting in a circle. And the amount of humanity in that room with these lovely kids empathizing and caring for this student. And the idea of I like phrases with multiple meanings, but making mistakes on purpose. In that, but not in the accidental sense, but on purpose. We knew what our purpose was. It didn't go as we intended, but the mistake was on purpose. And when you think that every kid comes to us with human capacities, all these human capacities, all we've done is try to define that. People talk about the whole person. We have a holistic education. We said, okay, what does the whole person look like then? Well, I've always felt compelled to define our terms. And then because this model works to human commonalities and builds human capacity, there's a lovely simplicity to saying, so we're becoming human, not just biologically Homo sapiens or whatever, but actually fulfilling our human capacity. And yeah, and I do think it's extremely rewarding to know the people and work with a smaller team and work with you can know the parents in a small school. You can know every kid in a small school. It's hard when there's 2,000 kids. So, systems and structures, which I believe in and are necessary, take the place of human relationships and human contact, because there's just too many people. So I just think, and I've often found also that some intentionally small schools are created by individuals. They're sort of somebody's dream. They're, and people rally to that dream. Windhoek International School, the dream was to bring international education to apartheid, basically. And so all kinds of people rallied around that dream. Low salaries, no guarantees. We were inventing the school. I used to talk about it as if it was in existence. We'll have this and this and this, and people believed. They believed in the why. So that we're small because you can be more human when you're small seems to me to be a real powerful reason to keep it to a humanly manageable size.
Where everybody can contribute.
Yeah, and then I suppose the other thing is to be intentional. This community session, I keep talking too much about one example, it's just because I'm sitting here in Quito, but we intentionally put all stakeholder representatives in the room together. So it was on purpose, and we didn't know how it would go. It went beautifully well, but even if it had gone wrong, we knew our intent was in line with our learning purpose, which is to genuinely, intentionally build a community. You can't build a community if the people aren't in the room. So I think beyond the goodwill and the everything is to be intentional and actually quite strategic about being human.
Kevin, I loved what you said about life not being organized into disciplines so much. I worked in England, and the curriculum, we called it cross curriculum many moons ago when I worked there. And I haven't worked in England for a long time, and I miss the way that everything is viewed entangle with each other, because life is not organized into discipline. So and even with thinking about which thing to say, that you said, everything is so interconnected. It's really hard to pick one thing to say, because it's also important. Like somebody in our group talked about simplicity, but if you don't know your people, as you also said, it's hard to distill down to be simple, because you're not doing it in the right way for the right people. So I think all these things all these things happening at the same time is so important to keep them all. I don't know how you keep them all in your mind, but having strategy, keeping it simple. But anyway, I'm super inspired. I wasn't even going to jump on the call this morning, but thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. It's good to see you again. I mean, it's interesting. Another thing to avoid is false dichotomies. A board chairman I work with would say, beware the power of or and embrace the power of and. I don't think we can be transdisciplinary unless we understand the disciplines. Because you don't want to offer kids a mush. It has to be deep scientific learning with deep scientific processes. But there's immense beauty in those. I've just done a project called the Beauty Project, where the whole school was engaged, all kids working in multi-age teams, and they chose themes like the beauty in science, the science of beauty, the beauty in history, the history of beauty, the beauty in diversity, the diversity of beauty. So it's not disciplines versus transdisciplinary work. It's what combination, what Rubik's Cube twist, what twist of the kaleidoscope has things find their best place in a system. It's almost the same with the human community. What combination of opportunity and people lets everybody find their best place? It's evolution as well. Survival of the fittest, not the physically fittest, just the most fit for purpose. So all those things are connected. And the trick then, Natalie, is to turn that into actual working practical systems. And that's what we've tried to do, is say, recognizing all that connection complexity, what's it look like as a working model for teachers? A final thought, George Box, I don't think I said this on the recorded bit. He's a physicist. I just love this. He said, all models are wrong, but some are useful. So the PYP model is wrong. In one sense, I could tell you what we could have done better, but it was really useful, and it still is. CGC is a model. It's wrong, but it's useful. There are things wrong with the model. But once we get to a working model that is not perfect, but pretty damn good, and then people like you and Jerry and everybody that we work with engage with it, and we just keep making it better. And that's also a community effort. It really is co-creation. We get the idea, here's another way to do it. So that's why my work is so much fun, working with smart people, coming up with ways to make things work even better. So, yeah.
One of the things that I spoke about with our breakout room was just the importance for us as a school to start with the culture, and the power of starting with the culture has meant that through our recruitment of new teachers, we've been able to be clearer with ourselves about who we are and what we mean by learning and what we mean by our learning culture and what it means to belong to this learning ecosystem. And the impact of bringing people into that vision, and just seeing that, I was saying to the group that we're now a few years into some of those people joining the team, and some of them are in their first year, and just that because we were able to be clear with them from the outset of the necessity to roll up their sleeves and really be part of the change or the growth of the school, has been really empowering for them to enter the team, while it still feels like the school has history and legacy, but the idea that we've actually been able to honour all people coming into the community, and just the importance of starting with the culture as a foundation has then empowered us to then think forward into the curriculum and how we might approach some of those things. So I thought that was worth sharing with the group.
I mean, I don't know a school that's done more intentional, purposeful culture building with all of the huge amounts of time and energy that everyone at Montclair seemed to put into that process. But it's funny, people have odd ways to look at things sometimes. Just people have said to me, okay, so you have this wonderful system, and then some people leave, and then new people come in. What do you do then? And I'm thinking, that's why you have the system, so that you can orientate people into something. So what's the alternative? Let's be totally random so that it won't make any difference if we lose anybody. Having a culture is what you bring people into. And I just see a huge difference in the new teachers in a school that I'm quite used to. I may have worked with them for several years. They already begin to feel like Moncrest teachers or Mind teachers. Interesting, the kids, again in Mind, say, oh, that teacher isn't a Mind teacher yet. The kids recognize the kind of teacher. It's so interesting. The more you do this kind of work, the more interesting it gets, because I haven't seen things that make it not work. I've just seen things that are, whoa, here's a new thread that I hadn't even thought about, so. Anyway.
All right. So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining the call. There were new faces on today's call, so thank you so much for joining us. Kevin, I really appreciate your comments today and inspiring us to continue the work that we're doing, especially in small schools. I hope to see many of you around in further sessions. Just a quick plug. We are in the very beginning stages of planning a leadership retreat for members of small schools coming up in January 2025. So we're looking for a small group of international school leaders from around the world who want to come together and think about some more of this work. So more information to come soon. We're really excited about this group and what it's doing. And Kevin, once again, thank you so much for your words. Really inspiring today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for the chance to talk to you. It's been great to see you.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.